The State Department is urging Americans to avoid traveling to parts of Jamaica. The capital is a virtual war zone as police step up their assault against gangsters, protecting one of the world's top drug lords who's wanted by American authorities.
On the night his son was buried, a fire broke out inside a maximum security prison in Kingston, Jamaica. The man inside the cell could not get out. The guards took 15 minutes to respond. The hospital was 5 minutes away. It took them 2 hours to get him there. By then, he was gone. His name was Lester Lloyd Coke, and the people who wanted him dead
dozens of people now dead in Jamaica
had very good reasons to make sure he never made it to a courtroom in the United States. Because what he knew could have brought down a government. To understand who Lester Lloyd Coke was, you have to understand Jamaica in the 1960s. Kingston was a city carved up by politics. Two parties, the Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National Party, controlled different neighborhoods the way gangs controlled territory. The difference was these were actual political parties with actual government power behind them. In the poorest areas, loyalty was not optional. You lived in a JLP neighborhood, you supported the JLP. You lived in a PNP neighborhood, you supported the PNP. And both sides had enforcers, men with guns whose job was to make sure the other side did not cross into their territory during election season. Lester Coke grew up in Denham Town, a slum in West Kingston. In 1966, when he was around 19, he was shot multiple times and left for dead in the street. The men who saved him were from Tivoli Gardens, a housing project built by the JLP and run by the party's local strongmen. That moment changed everything. When you almost die and a group of people pull you back, you do not forget it. Lester Coke spent the rest of his life paying that debt. He became an enforcer for the JLP. He became the protector of Tivoli Gardens, and eventually he became one of the most feared men in the Caribbean. He called himself Jim Brown, after the American football star he watched in a film called The Dirty Dozen. By the mid-1970s, Jamaica was in crisis. The election of 1976 was approaching, and both parties were pulling every lever they had. Prime Minister Michael Manley and his PNP had shifted towards socialist policies. He was meeting with Fidel Castro. He was making the CIA very nervous. On the other side was Edward Seager and the JLP, backed by the United States, backed by money, and backed by men like Lester Coke. Into this war stepped a man who wanted nothing to do with any of it, Bob Marley. Marley had agreed to perform at a free peace concert called Smile Jamaica on December 5, 1976. He wanted it to be neutral. He did not want it to be political. He made that very clear. The PNP announced an election date that landed right before the concert, making it look like Marley was endorsing their campaign. Marley was furious. But the concert was already set. The posters were already printed. And in Tivoli Gardens, the JLP's men saw a man they now considered the enemy. December the 3rd, 1976, 8:30 in the evening, Bob Marley and his band were at his home at 56 Hope Road, rehearsing. The gates to the property were usually guarded. That night, the guards had disappeared. 2 white cars pulled through the open gate. 7 armed men got out. They shot Marley's wife, Rita, in the head as she sat in her car in the driveway. They found Bob in the kitchen with his manager, Don Taylor, and guitarist, Don Kinsey. A gunman opened fire across the room. A bullet grazed Marley across the chest and lodged in his arm. Don Taylor took 5 bullets to his legs and torso and was airlifted to Miami in critical condition. Marley survived. 2 days later, still injured, still bleeding inside, he walked onto the stage at National Heroes Park in front of 80,000 people and played for 90 minutes. When he finally came off stage, someone asked him why. He said, the people who wanted to stop him were not stopping, so neither was he. After the shooting, the gunman drove back to Tivoli Gardens. Marley's neighbor, who heard the chaos from next door, heard someone shout as the attack began, "Is Seager men? Dem come fee kill Bob." Don Taylor, Marley's manager who nearly died that night, later said that he and Marley were both present when several of the gunmen were caught and executed in what Jamaicans call a ghetto court before one of them was killed. He said the hit was arranged by the CIA. Payment was cocaine and guns. A Netflix documentary called Remastered, Who Shot the Sheriff, placed Lester Coke directly at the scene. Marley knew who had done it. He never publicly said the name. But years later, asked directly if he knew who shot him, he said yes, and that they had never been caught. The CIA has never confirmed or denied any involvement. They never do. After the shooting, things moved fast for Lester Coke. His mentor, Claude Massop, was killed by police in 1979. With Massop gone, Coke took control. He renamed the gang the Shower Posse, Shower, from Edward Seeger's campaign slogan about blessings raining down, and began building something that went far beyond Jamaica. Through the 1980s, the Shower Posse expanded into the United States, New York, Miami, Kansas City, Chicago, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. They moved cocaine and marijuana at a scale that put them on the radar of federal law enforcement. A 1988 New York Times report stated that the Shower Posse controlled up to 40% of the crack cocaine market in certain American cities at their peak. They were blamed for over 1,000 murders across Jamaica and the United States combined. Back in Tivoli Gardens, Coke was untouchable. The police did not enter without permission. He ran the neighborhood like a parallel government, settling disputes, distributing money to the poor, funding community projects. Edward Seeger called him a protector of the people. People who had nothing called him the same. In 1990, the US Department of Justice had enough. Lester Coke and 33 other Shower Posse members were indicted on drug trafficking, firearms, and murder charges. The JLP had lost the election that year, replaced by the PNP. The political protection Coke had relied on for a decade was gone. He was arrested, taken to the General Penitentiary in Kingston to await extradition to the United States. He sat in that cell and waited. And while he waited, people on the outside started thinking very hard about what would happen if he ever made it to an American court. He knew where the money went. He knew which politicians had asked for what. He knew the names of people who could not afford to have their names said out loud. His lawyers fought the extradition for 2 years. In February 1992, the British Privy Council rejected his final appeal. His lawyers were on their way to the prison to deliver the news. They never got to tell him. February 23rd, 1992. It was the same day as his son Mark's funeral. Mark, known as Jati, had been shot from a motorcycle 3 weeks earlier in downtown Kingston. The grief in Tivoli was raw. The city was tense. That night, a fire broke out in Lester Coke's cell. The official story was that a mattress and a curtain caught fire. No source for the fire was ever identified. No investigation produced a clear answer. The guards took 15 minutes to respond to the alarm. During the inquest that followed, one prisoner testified that he had been pressured to cover up for wardens who abandoned their posts while the cell burned. It took nearly 2 hours to get Coke to a hospital that was minutes away. He died of his burns. February the 23rd, 1992. His lawyer, Tom Tavares Finson, stood outside the courthouse after the inquest closed without a verdict. He said, "If you believe Jim Brown just burned to death by accident in his jail cell, you'll believe in the Tooth Fairy. The only thing I can tell you for sure, and I saw the body, is that Jim Brown is dead." The coroner returned an open verdict, which means they could not explain it, which means nobody was ever held responsible. Tens of thousands of people attended the funeral. Edward Seeger, the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, the man whose party Lester Coke had served and killed for, walked beside the casket. He told reporters that the dead man had been a protector. Lester Coke's youngest son, Christopher, who everyone called Dudas, watched all of it. His father burned alive in a cell. His brother shot dead on a motorcycle. His sister killed in a separate shooting. and the men who ran the country standing at the graveside in suits. Christopher Coke took over the Shower Posse that year. He was 23. He ran it for nearly 2 decades. He became known as the president of Tivoli Gardens. In 2010, the Jamaican government finally agreed to extradite him to the United States. The military operation to arrest him left over 70 people dead. He was eventually sentenced to 23 years in an American federal prison. Dudas had one condition before he surrendered. He asked a reverend to help him get to the US Embassy himself, because he was terrified of what would happen if he was handed over to Jamaican authorities. He did not want to burn. Nobody was ever charged for the death of Lester Lloyd Coke. The fire was never officially explained. The guards who left their posts faced no consequences. The inquest closed. The case went cold. The secrets he carried, about the CIA, about the politicians, about who ordered what and when, went with him into that cell and never came out. His lawyer was right about one thing. Jim Brown is dead. Everything else is still a question.